Couldn't help it. I had to try to be funny. And I ended up drifting into some contemporary stuff, some politics, and some things about war and masculinity. Ha. I'm Mark Roach. Welcome to Marx Headroom, M-A-R-X, for the newcomers. So, what's new? Tune into Hedroom Tonight on Saturday night, 7 p.m. on YouTube if you like. Check up on some efforts to evoke some humor and find a kind of a new way to approach some rather heavy topics like war and progress and where we think we're going. But anyway, you might get a laugh out of it. You might scoff at it. I don't know. But there's part of me that wants to say, I don't care, but I do care. I care a lot. And I work from a place of trusting what's going on inside of me. And that's the way I've always rolled, whether it was working in athletics and school, education, or in my relationships and in my business life. And it really transforms to the feeling of being an artist with what God has given us, me, and to work with. So that's the origin and kind of the point of view that I'm coming from. What do I call it? Sometimes I mistakenly call it Rumpelstiltskin, but really it's Rip Van Winkle. It's like I try not to pay attention to everything, kind of out of fear of getting too angry over being pulled in or trying to conform to something that's not really true for me. And because my experience has been not to necessarily trust the narrative or the explanations that are given. And I often find that setting a goal is an interesting process for people to say they want this or they want that, and then they get it and they decide that it wasn't really what they expected or they wanted something different. And then they just have to bury it and kind of live a life out of regret that turns into bitterness. So I guess you could say I do it the other way around, or I try to live without an end or a goal in mind other than just being in the moment and trusting that God and the Spirit and all of the magic that we dream of having in our life is actually operating and that, calling it like it is. What happens? Well, maybe I wanted that. And sometimes it works out in a way that makes me smile, and sometimes it makes me hurt really bad. Nonetheless, I'm still here, and if you're one of the few that are listening, then I'm happy to have a chance to have maybe an impact or an influence on your way of thinking. Someone from back home in Springfield, Missouri, looked at one of my articles recently, and I think she was a year or two younger than I am in high school. We went to high school together, and she sent me an email. I really appreciated that. That was really cool. She'd been out in the world and had come across some new things herself. I think she had lived in a large major metropolitan area and went back home to take care of her mother. And like I often do, and go back up to Springfield to look in on my mother. But it was interesting because what she shared with me was that what I put out seemed to, I don't know, I got the tone that it seemed a little bit unusual because, and I get this a lot from people, because I'm not arguing for a certain point of view. I'm quite confident in my point of view. I mean, my point of view has been validated in business and athletics and in relationships that, I feel like I've got a pretty firm handle on reality. And in some viewpoints that I have being fair and just, in spite of the way that things keep unfolding, for the larger collective. So, but anyway, what she shared was really comforting, because she said, what, Mark, what you share really makes me think. And I've been called provocative before and a risk taker. And I think if you call me a risk taker, I feel misunderstood. But if you tell me I'm provocative, I understand that that's the impact that kind of my essence has on other people. And it's not meant to knock people down, but actually to knock down some of the patterns and the thinking that people have about life and about relationships and about themselves, and so maybe what I consider to be false limitations of what we can achieve in our lives, and how it really does boil down to the point of it, being an individual and the best individual that you can be, rather than giving away your power to institutions or to other things. But you can only do some of that incrementally, because, I mean, you think about, what's happened in the last 200 years or 1,000 years, listen to some of my comedy, read some of my articles, read the whole 28 books that I put out in the last few months. I didn't write them all in the last 28 months, but they're a culmination that I finally decided to throw out there and make sure that they were available for people. But they are really an exploration of consciousness, and the exploration of consciousness doesn't necessarily have an end game or an end result. It's more of an experiential flow to life that many masters and people that have gone through trauma and tough times, like I have, and probably like you have too, end up letting go of a lot of the standards and the dogmas of life, and finding the direct path to God, and letting the Spirit, kind of lead them through life, and it makes it to the point where, yeah, you may feel some boredom now and then. You also may feel more than you can handle from time to time. But when you play the game like that, you're engaged, you're involved, and things are happening. And there's a level of valuation of those that is not materialistic. It's very experiential and very spiritual for me. And I hope that bleeds out through these, the vibes of the video, and the sound of my voice might reach people, to encourage them not to follow me, because that's really the last thing that I'm hoping for. I say that with a little bit of shadow work going on there, because, we all have egos, and we all look around and have to eat and function in this world, and it seems to be a more pleasant experience with some of the niceties of life. But none of those niceties mean a thing without the grounding and the fundamentals that come from the kind of lifestyle and point of view that I'm sharing here. So hopefully that's of benefit to somebody. And I got a kick out of some of the war stuff this week. I almost regret even saying it like that, but it's not entertaining. It's very devastating in many ways. But on the other hand, it's very revealing what's going on, and you have to come to your own conclusions about that. I put out a bunch of oil and gas videos this week to talk about oil price and how that, works its way through a system. It's so complicated, and for a common person to try to boil it down to one or two sentences is nearly impossible. But it does point out how complex and interconnected we are around the world today, versus an oversimplified view of running a country like a donut shop, for example. It just doesn't work that way anymore. at least with all of our interconnectedness and electricity and 8 billion people on the planet. So found myself, looking at I didn't watch the Academy Awards, but I thought it was interesting that Sean Penn won an award and wasn't there, and it made me think of Brando, and some stuff came up. I talked about in my comedy stuff with Hedroom Tonight. I end up talking about Dr. Strangelove, which, if you remember, that's a Peter Sellers movie from like 1964. I think it won an Academy Award, and it was very interesting in how it works in war, and many of um, very masculine issues that are associated with some of the leadership in walking into war, and the way that we speak of our enemy, so to speak. You might find that kind of interesting if you've never heard of that. You might look it up. It's black and white. Peter Sellers is quite masterful, and it's kind of something that I found myself laughing at whenever the idea came back up to associate some of the characters that are playing war games today, um, seem almost exactly like some of the characters from that movie, so to speak. So you might find that kind of fascinating to consider that point of view. What else? Well, I found it interesting. Some people talked about how, I come across with this energy and this vitality, and almost like a star, somebody said. And I got a kick out of that because I downplayed that for years, and I got that kind of feedback from people back, a long time ago, that there was some energy and some charisma, and ultimately it's this zest that I have that I can't. It's a light that I just can't douse anymore, and I have to reach out and try to find a way to let it through the cracks. And the problem has been that the medium has not been for me because I'm not a conformed person, and the whole concept of calling me an actor, so to speak, is very, very conflicting, because I'm not someone that takes direction from others. Although I play well with the right group, with the right people, with the right leaders, with the right family system, so to speak, and people in my lives that I trust the attractions that have occurred, and the um, weaning that's taken place in my life to refine the group of people that I spend time with and interact with, and feel like I'm in a relationship with. And but that hasn't always been the case. I've always found that it seemed like I was waiting for and biding my time, looking for the right place and the right time, the right way to express myself. And I'm feeling more and more aligned with that now. And I'm not like, when I realized I've talked about doing this comedy stuff, like my mentor, who was a rather significant factor in my life, a father figure who was also a coach and a director in Hollywood to some stars, and had a strong theater background. And so he spoke a lot of truth to me, and we became close, and he shared some honest opinions with me. And I never I never followed through with some of the recommendations or the structure that he gave me. And I realized that a part of it was that he was only part right. There was part of me that was not going to be that stand-up comic that went with his show around the world or around the countryside and made the tour of the standard comic, where he refines his material to find out what people are finding funny. And it sounds really arrogant to say, at least it may sound arrogant to some people to say, I I trust what I say is, or I trust what's funny to me, and that's what I want to express. Or the same thing is true in what I value in some of the social situations where I offer, some perspective on what I've seen since I've been all over the world and seen different cultures and worked in various communities, been at the top of, with the super rich and the elite, the top 1%, and understand how politics and corporate structure, as well as, back at the grassroots level, how community works and all of the entire hierarchy. Not like I'm trying to sell myself as a master because I'm not selling. I'm just explaining here the concept of selling out, selling of doing something that I can't do and couldn't do. Never, not like I have a choice, because I was always expressing what seemed to be coming out was a natural way of delivering lines. And for some director, whether I respect it. It wasn't about whether I respected them or not. It was like that circumstance and those lines and that moment with that actor or that actress in this setting on this set. That's what came out, and I had to trust that. That's why I left the boardroom. That's why I left the contrived, situations that I was able to successfully um, construct in life for myself and for others, but I was not about playing that role day after day, kind of like that looked like being a factory worker to me. But for some people, it's delightful, and I really have a lot of respect for people that are able to pull that off. Honestly, it's like their life mission is to continue to care for those, for what they may have started or what they've inherited. Um, I'm not one of those. I'm more of that provocative voice that has a unique view. I sat in a men's group with a bunch of very successful people this last week and voiced some views that were totally contrary to where they were. But I didn't apologize for where I was coming from, but I just explained that you probably didn't encounter this, and this, and this. And this is how something that I'm just throwing out here that you all might benefit from considering because it's another view. And I think the tolerance of that group for what I have to say, given what I've been through, and also grounded to the fundamentals of wanting the best for my fellow man, and even being a nonviolent and trying to hone in that competitive spirit where you have to feel like you push someone else out of the way to get to the front of the line is something that a world that I'd like not to exist. And that may be fantasy. It may be something that we collectively can find a way um, to do better at. It may take another 1,000 or 2,000 years, and that may ultimately be outside of our reach. And we may find ourselves dealing with some bigger issues as things are evolving rather fast these days, it seems like. So the contrived, the artwork that was done for expression that really did denote a carried forth of like a voice of what's the guy's name? Lane Staley, the guy that ended up dying young. With it, Chris Cornell, who was a performer, but also had access to some truths of life that were expressed through his music in short lines. I mean, Willie Nelson, had that quality of bringing people together with his tunes and had a magic about him that brought people in the room together at a time when they were really divided in the past. I'd love to find that type of role for myself to see, and not that I'm looking for a following, but I think, Willie was just being Willie, maybe Lane was being Lane, and Chris was being Chris without having a lot of forethought or force in in creating or manipulating some following and trying to maintain them like these formulaic creations that we're starting to see through. And I think we're at this point where the old formulas of force and manipulation are kind of being let go of. In fact, one of the pieces that I just wrote this week that's going to come out on Saturday is a video on Transcendent and also an article on roachcreative.com. I think I've also got the article or a different cut of the article on Substack, on the Transcendent Substack. But it talks about how AI could actually be quite a relief. All this thinking and this ritualization that we are really have been trapped by, that's not really working. Not really working for everyone, for sure, is potentially AI could be the relief from that burden. And then once relieved of that, imagine how do you operate? What do you do? If you're no longer defined by what you know, what you memorized, or what your trained function is that you've performed robotically in society. And maybe it does come down to some essentials that some of us have access to through our heart about caring and love and finding an exceptional way to the old ways. I'll leave that with you now. I'm going to go break my 5-day fast, and I'm wishing you all the best this week.